Hello, everyone, and welcome to the With Chinese Characteristics podcast. I'm Natalie.
I'm Cherry.
Together, we have something very new and exciting for you today.
Besides Natalie's new voice on the podcast.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a sore throat, but it is the With Chinese Characteristics Book Club.
Yay!
And what a book we have chosen for the first
2 years.
First 2 years. Yeah, it's going to take a while to get through. But it's one of the great classics of Chinese literature.
Yeah.
It's got heroes.
Yeah.
It's got villains.
Yeah.
It's got bandits.
Wow.
It's got magistrates.
Wow.
It's got adventure, romance, villainy,
everything.
jokes,
Okay.
colorful characters.
Okay.
What book are we doing, Cherry?
We are doing The Water Margins.
Wow. Also known as All Men Are Brothers, also known as Outlaws in the Marsh.
Also known as its original name in Chinese, 水浒传. Well, we're calling this the WCC Book Club.
Wow.
Because that's how cool we are. We have acronyms now. And this will be the first episode of many more to come. The Water Margins, 水浒传. We'll read it. We will talk about it on the episode every other week-ish. No promises, but we'll try to keep up the schedule. 2 chapters at a time. And since it's a book with 100 chapters, this process will probably take us a while to finish. So we encourage you to pick up a copy of the book and go on this journey with us.
Yes.
It will be fun.
Yes, it will. I can confirm it will be fun. Little background.
Yeah.
Cherry did not want to do this idea with me. She's like, I don't want to read one of like the 4 classics, Chinese literature. And I was like, no, Cherry.
I mean, I had to read it.
I know,
school.
but you read like the kids version.
I did read the kids version.
And I was like, Cherry, no, you have to read the actual version. And Cherry read it and she's like, okay, we can get some content out of this.
Yeah, we can get a lot of content
We can get a lot of content out of this.
Yes. So the version we're going to read is an English translated version. Of course, we will also look at other materials, the original Chinese text.
When you say we, you more mean you will look at the original Chinese text.
Yes. I will show you.
I could look at it.
Yeah, you can look at it. But that's all.
I might be able to read it.
Yes. So be it the original Chinese text or the many versions of the TV shows and movies that's been made from the book.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll even talk about my favorite Japanese RPG video game series.
Yes.
Suikoden.
Yes. But if you are going to pick up a copy and read along, we encourage you to look for the one that's called Outlaws of the Marsh. And it is translated by Sidney Shapiro.
Sidney Shapiro.
Sidney Shapiro. It is translated, but it was.
Yeah.
It was translated?
He's dead now.
Okay, but still, it's his translation.
Yeah.
English is very confusing.
The version translated by Sidney Shapiro.
The version translated by Sidney Shapiro.
Did you look up anything about Sidney Shapiro?
No.
So interestingly, he went to China during World War II.
Okay.
He wanted to learn French and go to take French language school in the army, but they sent him to Chinese language school. And then he was in Shanghai and he stayed after the revolution.
Oh.
And he became a naturalized PRC citizen.
Oh.
And was up like in the PRC Arts Council and all of these like ministries.
Okay.
Which is also very rare.
Mm.
And his other job was he would always play the American villain or the white villain in Chinese propaganda movies.
Mm.
And then one of the more famous thing he did is his translation of The Water Margin. Mm. And we'll probably talk about maybe a little bit why we chose this translation when we get to the actual start of it, but it's a little tidbit.
Okay. Well, my impression is that this translation is wildly respected.
Yeah.
Because there's several other copies of translations out there, and there's a lot of mistakes that were made. And you really sort of have to be immersed in Chinese culture or the language for a while in order to be able to grasp the essence. And
also a thing I think you're probably going to talk about, though, is that it's written in Chinese vernacular. It's not written in classical. Some of the translations, they try and make it a little too heroic or kind of like, like you're reading...
Too fantastical.
Whereas Sidney Shapiro's translation is almost like you're reading like an airport paperback, like a thriller.
Yes.
And this is from the 80s. He wrote it, but
within
the context of how the book was written at the time and its audience and all that, it is closer to like being a thriller than to being like the Odyssey or the Iliad or something.
Yes, exactly. So the version, and it's published by Foreign Language Press, Beijing, China. The first edition was in 1993. and we're reading the 14th print. You can do any of the print, obviously.
Yeah. There's also machine translated versions on like Project Gutenberg and stuff, but your mileage may vary with those.
Exactly. And this is notably the 100 chapters version. And the consensus is that the 100 chapters version is the closest to the originally circulated copy from, a few hundred years ago.
Yeah.
And the later versions mainly added plot lines after the outlaws, the heroes of the stories, got recruited by the government and became a part of the establishment. So who wants that? We don't need to read that.
Yeah.
So this is the version we're going to stick with. The book is called Outlaws of the Marsh, but we like the name Water Margins. So that's how we're going to refer to the book on the podcast.
Yeah.
But just know that's the copy we're reading. And we'll, of course, attach a link in our show notes.
Yeah. There's no perfect translation in English to the Chinese.
No. I like Water Margins. I think that's the closest one.
It's kind of poetic.
Yes. The thing about this, compared to a book like The Three Kingdoms or like Journey to the West, which are very literal titles, you get a very good idea of what the story is about. Mm-hmm. But Water Margins is sort of a vague name. Yeah. And that's kind of rare. Different people have different opinions on this, obviously. But some scholars think the name being vague is one of the reasons it was able to survive and go into wild circulation.
Because it does kind of have an anti-government, well, not kind of, it has an extreme anti-government message.
Yes. So it's a poetic name. It's a vague name. Yeah. You can understand it in your own way.
Yeah.
So introduction of the story, I have a little summary.
Okay.
Water Margins is a Chinese novel that tells the story of 108 heroes, the magical number in China, in Chinese, in the Northern Song Dynasty in the 12th century. Mm-hmm. These are sort of anti-heroes, actually, for one reason or the other, such as being dissatisfied with corrupt government officials or having gotten into trouble with law enforcement.
Yeah.
There are sometimes due to unjust laws. Well, sometimes they're just plain criminals.
Let's define slightly what we mean here by heroes.
Yeah.
Because they're not heroes in that like they...
Well, they're anti-heroes.
Yeah, but they're not heroic in that they save people from drowning or they take, cats out of trees. They're heroic in their abilities.
Yes.
Is really what makes them heroic.
Yes. I mean, they do try to insert justice and...
I know, but they also they're not above just robbing a caravan just because it looks like it's good money.
Yeah.
So like they're heroic in their abilities and they're aspirational, like in that nobody can hold them down.
Yes.
They can't be controlled by the government. They can't be controlled. They're just too tough, Cherry.
They are just too tough. Well, they're too tough, yet they're forced to flee.
Yeah.
So they just can't fit into this rigid society that is imperial China.
Yeah. That doesn't sound like China today.
So they assembled in Liangshan as their base and formed this band together. And they love to fight against injustice. They rob the rich to feed the poor, although not always. And they go on all sorts of adventures. And that's the story. We will, I guess, go on the journey with them.
Yeah.
So the structure of the book, the first 40 chapters-ish talk about the individual stories of these anti-heroes. How do I call them?
You just call them heroes.
Okay, heroes. And
I'm just establishing that they're heroic in their abilities, not necessarily in their deeds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And
they're hero characters.
They're hero characters, exactly. These stories in the first 40 chapters can stand on their own, but they're also interconnected. The next 40 chapters talk about the stories of them forming this band together and start their official rebellion and ending with their recruitment by the official government. And then the later chapters talk about what happens after that. We won't give it away just yet. The year in history when this book was written and started circulation, no one knows for sure. But the mainstream consensus is that it was written during the Ming Dynasty of China in the 16th century-ish.
So about 500 years after the events.
Yes. The book is usually credited to two authors, Shi Nai'an and Luo Guanzhong. Some historians think that Shi Nai'an wrote the majority of the book and Luo Guanzhong finished it off. Or some others say that Luo Guanzhong had edited the book that Shi Nai'an had written. Either way, these two are the names that you will see on every translation or the original text. Some also say that the stories were crowdsourced throughout years of circulation and therefore recreated in the process, and Shi Naian just captured the folklore that already existed, which is also very likely. Either way, it is one of the classics that is very well known in China. It has a huge imprint on the Chinese culture, even to today.
And I will say, there is some similar context between those two time periods, because 12th century, you have the Song Dynasty starts going down the toilet.
Yeah.
Stuff's going on. They can't keep control of everything.
Yeah.
Dudes aren't tough enough, Cherry.
No.
And then 16th century, you've got the Ming Dynasty. Stuff's kind of going down the toilet.
Yeah.
Dudes aren't tough enough. You got people coming in. So it's a slightly similar
cycle.
Situation.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that in a second. What's more interesting about this book is that it's written mostly in colloquialism. Or one might say vernacular Chinese. Unlike Chinese books from the same period that are considered classics, such as The Three Kingdoms, which was written in classical Chinese, which is the traditional style of the written language. Which means someone like me today, who is, I guess, uncultured, if I read it, it will be quite a hard time to read the original text.
Yeah.
So why this matters is that the classical Chinese is, it's just less accessible. Even back in the days, for people who are not Confucian scholars. It's got a learning curve. So this book, being written in the vernacular Chinese, undoubtedly has contributed to the wide popularity throughout the times. I think this being a history podcast and whatnot, I want to talk about the Song Dynasty. So the story was set in the Song Dynasty, specifically in the North Song Dynasty. And if you're not familiar with North or South Song Dynasty, just know that the Song Dynasty was the Song Dynasty before, and the court was chased off to the south, and they established the new capital there.
There's a thing,
and therefore that's the South Song Dynasty.
Yeah, there's a thing in Chinese history where, like, when a dynasty is strong, a lot of times they want their capital in the north so they can keep their eye on what's going on up there.
Yes.
But when they're weak, they run down to the south.
Yes, well, they're chased down to the south. So just in the first chapter, we go through a few emperors already, but the main emperor of this entire book is the Emperor Huizong, who is the 8th emperor of the Song Dynasty. He is not a very good emperor in terms of managing the country. He sees himself as sort of a cultural leader. He was an artist, although probably in the same way that an imperial British lord is a scholar or expert or botanist or whatever. In those old days, it doesn't take much to become an expert or to be good at something if you're rich and male, and I guess if you're the emperor.
Yeah.
Of course you're an artist. But nevertheless, supposedly he was talented in poetry, calligraphy, painting, music, all the useless things. You see?
Not tough, Cherry.
Not tough. He was into Taoism, religion. He collected artwork. He lived in lavish, luxurious lifestyles and wasn't really interested in the boring part of his job, actually managing the country. So in 1126, when the Jurchen-led Jin dynasty invaded from the north, he immediately abdicated and passed the throne to his son, and himself ran away to the south. He's like, you deal with it.
Yeah.
So still, he was captured not long after and spent the last decade of his life in captivity. So this part of the Chinese history, the Song court being chased all over China, well, I guess not all over China, being chased down to the south by the Jurchens, the Jins, who had taken over the capital and at one point also captured the emperor and the old emperor and a whole bunch of the imperial royal family, was the demise of the Northern Song dynasty, quite famously. And this was the 12th century version of the national shame, I think, which deeply humiliated the court, the Song people, the Han people. And in many historians' views, this holds significance in terms of China's decline, also economically, socially, and politically in the late imperial period. The century of shame, that was in the 19th century.
Millennia of shame.
Oh, the millennia of shame, exactly.
Starts here, Cherry.
Yes. And I read something, and this is just, I want to mention it because, so when the Song emperors was captured, the Jins also captured all these women, all these Han women. And they, they married them off, they treated them as sex slaves, they used them as, I guess, servants. And that was also another form of the national shame. And this had led to the transformation of women's rights after the Song Dynasty. Because of these royal family female members that were traded off, that were sold, that were captured, Chinese rulers greatly emphasized after the Song Dynasty was like, we got to learn the lesson. We got to emphasize the virtues of a woman. We got to emphasize a woman's chastity and loyalty towards her husband and I guess her original owner, So
We got to train these women better.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like...
If we had trained them better, they would have all just killed themselves.
Exactly. So the lesson is that if a woman's confronted between survival or the honor, you got to choose the honor. Meaning it's not an option to just, I don't know, remarry or... Especially to the non-Han people, the barbarians,
The Jing, who are basically just a slightly different type of Chinese person.
Exactly. So the invasion, the Mongol rule that came afterwards too, basically put
the Yuan dynasty.
The Yuan dynasty put a stop to the Song economy, which was quite advanced worldwide at the time, apparently. And why are we mentioning this? Well, because the water margin story, it is very anti-government, but it also offers a cautionary tale. Lost the mandate of the heaven, there was a corrupt court, a chaotic society, a government that lacks control of its own land, its own people, its own women. And this breeds chaos. And it's a slippery slope. Our 108 heroes in the first chapter, which we will mention.
Who are not all men.
There's some women in there, which is good. But they are treated, we say that they're heroes, but really in the book it was set up they're like demons that was released upon the I guess the Chinese play.
But they're kind of cool.
They are kind of cool. But it's chaos, right? They still have to show it as a negative sort of connotation. So this was troubled times. And they eventually get recruited by the court and their rebellion was put down. And they went on to put down other rebellions. So it's almost like a national therapy and like a lesson to the people, like what you should not do.
Yeah.
Even though maybe it's disguised in the exciting story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my introduction.
All right. So let's talk about, we're only going to talk about chapter 1 today.
Yes.
Because we've already spent a lot of time talking about the book and the stuff around it and all of that.
Well, can I also say the chapter 1, in some Chinese versions, it doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
In some, like, especially the free online version I was trying to access, because it's not really part of the main story.
It's more of an introduction.
It sets up the stories.
Yeah. Chapter 1 is the exposition. So we're going to be talking about it. If you read it, you might go like, this is a little bit much, talking about all these different emperors and who did what. And the rest of the book is not like that. Yeah. So take heart. Push through it.
You don't need to remember how many emperors there were in the first chapter.
So we start off, chapter 1 is called Zhang the Divine Teacher Prays to Dispel a Plague. Marshal Hong releases demons by mistake. So this is chapter 1. So we go through the series of, there was chaos after the end of the Tang Dynasty.
Yeah.
Intro gets into, but then we finally have the Emperor of Military Virtue who is born. A red glow suffused the sky when this sage came into the world, and fragrance still filled the air the following morning. He was, in fact, the god of thunder descended to earth. Brave and magnanimous, he was superior to any emperor who had ever lived. So he came in, took charge, conquered all these kind of warlords, and started setting up the Song Dynasty.
Yeah, he was a competent one. Although, is there any emperor that when they first became the emperor, you will say they're not the best emperor ever?
Yeah.
Maybe in reflection, you might go, he was not a very good emperor. But when he was in power.
Ren Shikai. Ren Shikai, they were pretty clearly like, this isn't a good idea. But even says, the land was in chaos. It was as if the clouds dispersed and revealed the sky. Yeah. This is the mandate of heaven coming down like a comet. Yes. Dispelling all the bandits and bad things.
Yeah. Now hearing these quotes again, it's actually quite exciting to read the first chapter now, I think. Yeah. It's very flamboyant language and descriptions.
Well, do you know what it is?
Yeah.
I feel like the context to put this into is it's like a 16th century Marvel movie.
This
is like the kind of the kind of feeling of it, right?
Yeah.
We're getting the epic backstory of some, whatever going on, right? And then we get into the characters.
Yes.
So we go through a list of imperial succession after the first emperor. Various time, the Jade Empire of Heaven has sent various stars and spirits to help out in court. Not necessarily like as warriors, but like sometimes just like as an administrator.
Yeah.
Like you sent a celestial tax collector.
Yes.
To help out.
Yes.
Make the emperor's court a little better.
Yes. We're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
It's very exciting, but at the same time, it's very rigid
No,
and structured.
Chinese heaven
Yeah.
is
The
just
Taoism
like,
heaven.
Yeah.
The Taoism
it's
heaven.
just like
the court.
the court.
Yeah.
It's like, you have the different positions. So finally, we go through a list of emperors. We get to the succession. They're all okay. But then we get to Emperor Renzong, who's a reincarnated some saint. And then after a long reign, though, plague strikes.
Yeah.
The plague grows worse and worse, killing huge numbers of the population. Everybody's dying of the plague. So this is a quote. Zhao Ji, the premier, and Wen Yanbo, his deputy, advanced and said, "The plague is raging unabated in the capital. Victims among the soldiers and the people are many. We hope, Your Majesty, in a forgiving and benevolent spirit, will reduce prison sentences and cut taxes, and pray to heaven that the people be relieved from this affliction." Which is all feels very like 21st century.
Yeah.
It's like we need a policy plan in place.
Yes.
It's like, we'll reduce taxes, we'll do this, but also we need to pray.
Yes.
And the emperor thinks about it and he says, yes, I will do that, and I will do the special prayers.
Yes.
So the emperor, as a policy decision, is ordering all the temples to pray. But the plague grows worse, Jerry. Prayers don't help.
No.
So they decide to get the divine teacher of the Taoists to lead a special prayer session.
Mm-hmm.
They go, there's this guy, he lives out in the mountains. He knows all the ways of the Tao.
Yeah.
We'll get him to come here and hold dispel the plague.
Yes.
Right? So they decide who's going to go. They send this guy named Marshal Hongjin to the mountains with the imperial edict and a box of the emperor's special royal incense sticks in a golden box.
Yes.
Which these incense sticks come up quite a lot in this first chapter.
Okay.
So Hong, just some guy, right? Just some bureaucrat, right?
Yeah.
Goes to the monastery, which is far away. It's like 7 days away, I think. The monastery all greets Hong. They have a big ceremony. They have a big feast with no meat, but the divine teacher isn't there. He lives in a thatched hut on the mountain where he meditates and cultivates himself in the way of the Tao.
Yeah.
This kind of annoys Hong. He's like, I came all this way. They can't just go get the guy. But they calm him down with some tea. Hong says, you say the divine teacher is on a thatched hut on the mountaintop. Why not ask him to come down and receive the royal edict? The abbot says, he's up there all right, keeping himself aloof from the world. But our divine teacher has an unusual knowledge of the way. He can ride the clouds and mists. No one knows exactly where he is. We ordinary Taoists are rarely able to see him. How can we ask him to come down? Like, we don't know,
Yeah.
Boss isn't here.
Yes.
His cell phone's turned off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, he doesn't do much teaching because he's in the mountain as a cloud.
Yeah.
So eventually, though, the monks tell him, in order to meet the divine teacher, he has to eat no meat, which Hong has apparently already been doing because he knows the drill.
Yeah.
He has to light the royal incense and walk up the mountain to kowtow at the summit. Mm-hmm. Also, he has to be sincere from his heart or it won't work.
Yeah. The teacher will see through him.
Yeah, teacher will see through him. Won't see it. All this to save China, right?
Yeah.
This is the whole empire is riding on Marshal Hong
Being sincere.
being sincere.
And he's just a guy.
He's
He's not like a religious guy.
No.
He doesn't have the credentials of being the most sincere.
No, it's like if
Most
modern
devoted.
DC you sent like the the Secretary of Transportation.
Yeah.
Pete Buttigieg's got to go up the mountain. So
Yes.
so he does all that, decides climbing the mountain, and eventually decides this is some bullshit.
Yeah.
He's like, he walks 2 to 3 li, which is an ancient Chinese mile.
Yeah.
It's about a third of a mile or half a kilometer.
He doesn't walk very long.
No, he walks like 2 kilometers.
Yeah.
He walks like 2 kilometers. And then he says, an important government official like me, when I'm in the capital, I lie on double mattresses and dine on banquet dishes. Even then, I don't have much energy. What am I doing here in straw sandals climbing this mountain path? Who knows where the divine teacher is anyhow? Why should I have to endure these torments? And I wrote, as I was reading it, I was like, did Mao write this?
Exactly.
So he keeps going. He's got his little incense in front of him. He's holding in his hands.
Yeah.
And then a tiger jumps out. And then he drops his incense. And then the tiger leaves and he picks it back up. And then a snake jumps out.
Yeah.
And breathes poisonous gas at him.
Yeah.
It was like a magical snake.
Yeah.
And he drops it and does all this. And he's like, this sucks. And eventually, though, he meets a kid playing a flute, watching some cattle.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kid says, and Marshall Hong's kind of rude to the kid.
Yeah.
But the kid says, oh, yeah, the divine teacher knew you were coming, and he flew to the capital on a giant bird. So, you're good.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is presumably some sort of trial. But Marshall Hong's really lazy.
Yeah.
And he decides to believe it. And it's interesting to point out, Marshall Hong believes it is plausible that the divine teacher did fly to the capital on a giant bird.
Yeah.
Did fly to the capital on a giant bird.
Yeah.
He doesn't really question it.
No.
He just thinks, yes, that's something a Taoist can do.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes, okay, cool. And he goes back down to the monks. And the monks go, oh, yeah, that was the divine teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, which obviously. So he can appear however he wishes. Then they feast and they give Hong a sightseeing tour of the monastery because crisis is over.
Yeah.
The divine teacher is going to fly to the capital on a giant bird.
Yes.
And do a prayer.
Yeah.
To get
Presumably.
Presumably.
Yeah.
And get rid of the plague. But during the tour, Cherry, this is a quote, he observed a building with walls as red as peppers and vermilion colored latticework on its two front windows. A lock as thick of a man's arm clamped together its double doors. A dozen strips of paper pasted across the crack where the doors met were stamped with innumerable red seals. Beneath the front eaves was a red plaque inscribed with letters of gold reading, Suppression of Demons Hall. What is this place? Asked the marshal. I don't know, Marshal Hong. What do you think it is?
It's quite literal, the name.
It's the Suppression of Demons Hall.
Yeah.
The abbot explains that a previous divine teacher in the Song Dynasty had trapped demons there, and every divine teacher since has reinforced the seals and even poured bronze into the lock so it could never be opened. If the demons escaped, it would cause unimaginable chaos across the realm. Marshal Hong is surprised. I would certainly like to see a demon, he thought. To the abbot, he says,
Be careful what you wish for, Marshal Huang.
He says, open the doors. I want to see what a demon looks like.
Yeah.
The abbot says, no, can't open the doors. There's demons in there.
It says on the seal.
Yeah. Right? The marshal laughed. Nonsense. This story is an invention to delude people. You've deliberately prepared this place so you can say you've got demons imprisoned as proof of the power of your Taoist magic. I've read many books, but none of them says anything about how to lock up demons. Spirits inhabit only the nether regions. I don't believe you've got any demons in there. Open up and let me have a look. So, one thing I find fascinating about this is sometimes you assume this is a world like this. There's demons in the hall. Mm-hmm. You think, yeah, people can fly. There's demons. All this stuff is plausible to everybody in it.
Yeah.
But like in reality, when you go back in history, people will believe some things we find fantastical.
Yeah.
And
they won't believe the others.
They won't believe the other stuff.
Yeah.
So Marshal Hong is perfectly willing to accept that this divine teacher who can turn into clouds and transform his shape is going to fly to the capital on a giant bird and pray and
get rid of
obliterate the plague like a status effect in an RPG. It's gonna like ripple out from his prayer, and it's gonna the plague is gonna be done.
Yeah, but demons. No,
right?
No, that can't be.
But the demon hall is too much.
Yeah,
and I find that fascinating because from our perspective, from modern perspective, I'd be like, really? He's gonna fly the capital on a giant bird?
Yeah.
Like, can I see the giant bird? Like,
yeah.
Like, has anybody seen this happen? Mm-hmm. But if you were like, oh, that's the demon suppression hall. Every teacher for 50 years has put a seal on there. We can never open the hall. I'd be like, yeah, let's not go in the
no one's been there for 500 years. Yeah, I would not break the seal.
Yeah, I'll be like, let's leave it.
Quietly step away.
But Marshal Hong is a modern man. He doesn't believe in superstition.
No.
He wants to
not when it comes to demons, at least.
Not when it comes to demons. So, and when we say demons, it's more like evil spirit. It's not like demons in the Christian sense.
Not like Lucifer.
Not like Lucifer, Christian demons. They're more like evil spirits.
Yeah. And there are many of them.
There are many of them, right?
Different
and
forms.
They can live in
anything.
Objects,
Yeah.
they can haunt places. So it's demon is kind of I think the closest thing, but it's not
It's a
quite.
general term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the abbot continues and says, no, you can't let out the demons. That would be really a bad thing to do. It's going to cause chaos across the land.
Yeah.
And then Hong, though, threatens to have their orders shut down and have them all sent away as criminals if they don't open the door.
Yeah.
So
now he's like full of power.
Yeah.
He's feeling very invincible.
Yeah.
Because he just somehow, I guess, convinced the teacher
to go on a giant bird.
He saved the realm.
So the abbot relents. They break down the door, and then there is a tablet on a stone turtle with writing no one could understand.
Mm-hmm.
All totally cool, all totally normal. This doesn't sound suspicious at all.
No.
The back of the tablet says, "Open when Hong comes."
Yeah.
And Hong goes. And Hong,
that's me.
who's an idiot,
Yeah.
doesn't question this, and he goes, "Yeah, that's me, right? Okay, let's dig this thing up."
Yeah.
Um.
It's like calling me.
So the front of the tablet is all this mysterious writing they don't understand.
Yeah, which
The
is
back-
supposedly
the
the
back-
formal script.
The back says for Hong.
Yeah.
So Hong is like, great. He's like, knock over this turtle, knock over this tablet. Let's dig up the floor and see what's under here.
Yeah.
So they bring all these workmen in there to dig up the floor, and then they find a stone slab.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time the abbot's like, no, don't do this. And they move the slab, and they reveal a pit 100,000 feet deep.
Yeah.
And after that, the demons come out.
Yes.
So the demons come out. They burst through the floor. They burst through the roof of the temple.
Yeah.
They go every which direction.
Yeah.
They're all over
It's
the
like
place.
fireworks.
They're out they're out now.
Yeah.
So then Hong says, what was that? Basically.
Oopsie.
Yeah, and the abbot says, in this hall, the master of the way left a written warning. It said, 36 stars of heavenly spirits and 72 stars of earthly fiends, a total of 108 demons, are imprisoned here, held down by a stone tablet inscribed by their names, written in a mystic script that resembles dragons and phoenixes. If they were released on earth, they will cause no end of trouble. Now you've let them out. What are we going to do? Well,
in the Chinese official fashion,
yeah.
we're not going to do anything.
They're going to
pretend it never happened.
We're going to pretend it never happened.
Don't tell the
Hong
emperor.
goes like,
don't tell anyone.
Yeah. Hong goes, okay, you guys just fix it up. We'll put the lock back on the door.
Yeah.
No one's got to know. No one's got to know about this.
Yeah.
So, and that's what happened. The Taoists rebuilt the temple. And by the way, the period right now, remember, is the intro. So this is not the emperor in the time that Cherry was talking about earlier.
It's an earlier
This
emperor.
is slightly before.
Yeah. But the same dynasty.
Same
though.
dynasty. Taoists rebuild the temple, and Hong tells his men, don't mention the demons, guys. Let's just keep this between us. When they arrive back at the capital, they find the divine teacher had arrived and had already cured the plague and gone back home on a giant bird, as he does.
Yeah.
And it seems like maybe everything is going to be okay. Hong gets rewarded. No one finds out about the demons. A few decades pass, and there was, quote, peace throughout the land and no disturbances.
The last part of the first chapter goes, but not so fast. If it were true that nothing happened, what would we have to tell in this book?
Mm-hmm.
Reader, don't be alarmed. We're breaking down the fourth war here.
Yeah.
Reader, don't be alarmed. For in what follows, 36 stars of heavenly spirits come to earth, and 72 stars of earthly friends
Fiends.
72 stars of earthly fiends appear among men. Valiants hide in strongholds. Heroes gather in the marshes. Why? Read our next chapter if you would know. So, when I said earlier 108 demons,
Yeah.
it's also like, okay, but we also have 36, I don't know, stars of heavenly spirits and 72 earthly fiends. So
Yeah.
it's sort of like, are they demons? Or are they actually the highly spirits sent to earth to save the realm?
Well, so we talked
don't
about
know.
how these aren't like Christian concept of demons.
Yes.
But really, I think what they're not devils. Devils are like lawful. They have rules.
Yeah.
Demons are just chaotic.
Yeah.
And you know what these are is they're chaotic spirits. So they're not necessarily, I don't think, evil or good. They're just powerful and chaotic, and they cause chaos.
They're special beings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so now is time to talk about the Taoism.
It's like you handed out 108 assault rifles throughout Song China.
Sure.
Well, briefly though, so I feel like what's the moral of this chapter, right? Because you think Marshall Hong was an idiot, he was lazy, he released the demons.
He sort of embodies the Song like corrupt court as the background.
Yeah.
He's like, these are the kind of people that are in charge.
Well, also, I think the message is that you might get away with it. But just because you don't see the consequences of it doesn't mean they're not there.
Yes.
That the stuff that you do poorly now
100 years later
resonates across the empire.
Yeah.
And then so it's not just enough to kind of keep the plate spinning until you die.
Although that is what we do for many, many years after.
Yeah.
Don't know if we learned the lesson.
So Taoism?
Yeah, so let's talk about Taoism. So one thing I find fascinating when reading the first chapter, which was very religious heavy, you know, with all these rituals and very dramatic languages about the temple, the court, the teacher, you know, the big bird.
Well, can I give just a brief?
Yeah.
So this is if there's any Taoists or Buddhists or Confucianists in the audience, you might get mad at me, but
well, they're all three different. But okay.
Yeah, but three core religions of China. Confucianism, kind of a religion, not really, but you have Confucianism, which deals with society. You have Buddhism, which deals with eternity and reincarnation.
Sure.
And you have Taoism, which really kind of deals with the self.
Yeah.
All three, you know, for thousands of years in China. So when you hear that, they go to a temple, you don't know just from that whether it's going to be like a Taoist temple or a Buddhist temple or something else. So,
well, Taoism and Buddhism, the Chinese version of Buddhism, has also heavily influenced each other, I think, throughout the years. But one thing is just, I know it was like, you know, the old times, the imperial court, of course it was more superstitious, but I forget, or I've never learned how really superstitious and how ingrained religion was in terms of like justifying the rule of the empire.
Well, the emperor is not
the emperor.
The emperor is not a secular leader. It's basically as if it's like if the Pope ruled Europe.
Exactly.
Like if the Pope
he's a spiritual leader.
Yeah, if the Pope was the emperor, like because it's not just like they're in charge administratively.
Yes.
But part of the mandate of heaven is like somebody has to be filling that spot. You're providing like a supernatural shield.
Yes.
Protecting China from misfortune.
Yes. Which is the dragon himself.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about in a second after the Taoism. But the interesting part is that the Taoism, you know, the 72 stars and all that, there's a whole structure in terms of Taoism by the time it has developed into this stage in the Song Dynasty. Basically, it like mirrors the imperial bureaucracy in heaven and hell, which is the head of the heavenly bureaucracy was the Jade Emperor, who's also an emperor, but just a Jade Emperor, who governed the spirits, and he assigned them to oversee the workings of the natural world. Yeah. And you know, it's administrated moral justice, there's court administration, there's orders. The Jade Emperor in many stories will call a spirit to the court, and the spirit will have to go to heaven and meet the Jade Emperor and like explain for themselves.
Well, even in like talking about like you know, like the justice system, the divine judge, or I forget his name, but you know, they have a court and they have all the same rules that like Judge D has in his court, right? It's like it's just like it's exactly the same. Yes.
And I don't know if in Christianity, like if you are summoned by God, if you have done something wrong as a spirit, maybe I don't know enough about Christianity.
It's too unknowable.
And the gods in heaven, the many gods in heaven in terms of Taoism, they act and are treated like officials in the imperial court. Basically, worshipping the gods is a rehearsal of worshipping the officials that are humanly, I guess, that there are humans, but like they're just the court, but it's a celestial court. Yeah. The two blends together. So it's very good for the emperor, I guess.
Well, and
it's very good on the imperial court.
One thing that the Manchurians, when they took over China and created the Qing Dynasty, they created a fake like forbidden city and stuff.
Yeah.
to practice the rituals.
Yes.
Before they took over.
Yes.
Because it's like, it's not just like, can you collect the taxes? It's like, can you do all the proper stuff to keep the heavenly court happy too?
Exactly. And then, so that's the officials, right?
Yeah.
That are praised and worshipped, just like the court officials. On the other hand, I guess the anti-heroes of our story, which are sort of aligned to the demons and ghosts, they're treated like the outlaws and like the people who can't fit into the society in the real world.
Yeah.
And the common people who are not the ones who are worshipped, not the officials, nor the outlaws, they go by every day by worshipping the officials and avoid the outlaws, such as the demon spirits, and try to ensure the blessings of that they can get. Good health, a stable life, longevity, wealth, all this stuff. And it's all very set up to be a neat system that aligns the celestial court and the imperial court.
The imperial court is like a franchise.
Yes.
It's like you're opening a McDonald's.
Yeah.
Like downstairs. And it's like the mandate of heaven is like, do you have your franchisee license?
Yeah.
It's like you're making a copy of it.
Yeah.
And in some ways I feel like they're like, even though obviously the celestial court is obviously based off of the imperial court in reality, right?
Yeah.
But like at this point it's almost like the closer you can make the real physical court adhere to the celestial court, that means like China's better.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like
chicken egg situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tied to that, can we talk about the dragon?
Yeah.
So when you read the English translation, which translates some of these sentences literally, I have came to realize stuff that I would overlook if I just read the Chinese version. So the emperor's body is called Longti, the dragon's body. If the emperor's angry, the dragon's face is angry, right? That's the literal. They don't say the emperor. You can't refer to the emperor as him or the emperor.
Yeah.
You have to say the dragon's body is unwell.
Yeah.
Right? So
must be where Game of Thrones took it from.
Don't anger the dragon, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I guess that's what you say. That's what we always said. That his coat is the dragon's coat. It's the longpao, right? Like it's the yellow, the yellow robe that has dragons embroidered on it.
Yeah.
And common people can't wear yellow or something with a dragon on it. His hands are the dragon's claws. His seat is the dragon's throne. His sons and grandsons, not the daughters, are the offsprings of the dragon. And how literal we took that and how ingrained that's in our language is so, I don't know. It was a new experience to me. And I think you made a joke where it's like our cat, who we sometimes joke is a lion. Imagine the cat is sick, or like the lion's body is unsettled.
Is unwell,
Yeah. I think this being part of your daily language internalizes this sort of authority they have.
Yeah.
And the unhumanly nature that you gotta really worship, and like you as a commoner who is not a dragon just will never understand. So you better just believe in it.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I don't think it's obviously people in the past weren't stupid, but like part of the reason behind like the emperor being in the Forbidden City and all these rituals and stuff is to obfuscate the fact that the emperor is just some dude.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is the same everywhere. Look at the Netflix, Crown.
Yeah.
I was obsessed. The whole thing was like, they cannot be too close to the common people. You need to review your daily life a little bit so that they feel like a closeness to you.
Yeah.
Right? They feel like you represent the British people.
Yeah.
But also, they can't feel like you're one of them.
No. It's like the difference between, like an old school movie star and like someone who makes like vlogs on YouTube.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like there just has to be you only see them in little glimpses, right?
Yeah.
And then so they just seem larger than life, right?
Yes.
And when you see somebody like live streaming about their divorce or something, it's all just a little too
much.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's no longer a fairy tale. And
Yeah.
part of this imperial ruling, China, the British royal family, wherever, right, is that it needs to remain a fairy tale.
And the interesting thing is, in some ways, I feel like that's one of the things the mandate of heaven represents. Is that like if you're seen
As too common,
like if you have to flee the capital or whatever,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's like mandate of heaven
lost.
lost,
Yeah.
because otherwise you would be keeping that from getting out, right? You would have that kind of
the end justifies the means. Yes.
Well, anyway, hopefully that was interesting to people, and maybe if that interested people in the exposition, they might get a copy of it. And you know what? If you can't get a copy right away, or you're on the fence, or you just want to listen to us talk about it, you don't actually have to get a copy. You've got some time, but next episode, we're going to talk about chapters 2 and 3, which are going to get into the first of our heroes.
Can I just read the name of the chapter 2 and 3? Just for a preview, because it's so exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 2, coming next episode. Arms instructor Wang goes secretly to Yan'an Prefecture. 9 dragons, Shi Jing, wreaks havoc in Shi family village. So, very exciting.
It's chapter 3, Cherry.
I'm getting there. Chapter 3. Master Shi leaves Huaiying County at night. Major Lu pummels the Lord of the West. So as you can see, the chapter 2 and 3, we get into the actual heroes.
The nitty-gritty.
And the nitty-gritty and what they're doing. It will be quite a different type of story and writing than the first chapter. And I'm very excited about it.
Well, anyway, hopefully that was interesting to people, and hopefully my voice will be a little bit more recovered by the time we do chapter 2 and 3. And just as sort of bookkeeping, we're going to be putting these in the regular podcast feed for now, but once we get enough of them, we might split them off into a separate RSS feed.
Yeah.
But we're kind of just playing it by ear.
And avoiding the Buzzsprout fees of a new podcast. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We will see you next time at the WCC Book Club.
Have a nice day.
Bye.